I was supposed to be 200 miles away in Seattle, half asleep in a conference ballroom, sipping on lukewarm coffee and nodding along to some software summit about blockchain that I'd probably forget the minute I got home. Instead, I was standing in my own living room, mud on my boots, suitcase still in hand, staring at a crowd of total strangers, champagne flutes in hand, acting like my cabin was the lobby of some five-star resort. Let me tell you, I've seen a lot in my life, but nothing prepared me for the moment I watched a woman in designer sunglasses take selfies by my fireplace, or when a guy in khakis ran his hand along my hand-built deck and asked about the price per square foot. And there she was, in the middle of it all, Karen from the HOA clipboard, in her death grip barking out details about radiant heating, like she was on commission, smiling so wide I thought her face might crack. You know what I mean? There are moments when your brain just stops processing. For a second, I honestly wondered if I'd walked into the wrong house. But as soon as our eyes met, she dropped the ACT clipboard, nearly slipping from her hands, and in the most bizarre twist I've ever lived through, she whipped out her phone, dialed 911, and screamed to the whole room, "This man is trespassing on private property." I just stood there stunned as she tried to have me arrested in my own home. The only reason I was even there was pure dumb luck. My conference had been canceled last minute. Some pipe burst at the venue, so I figured I'd trade PowerPoints for pine needles and spend a quiet weekend at my off-grid place in the Cascades. Didn't tell a soul I was coming back early, not even my closest neighbors. I'd driven up 3 blissful hours, picturing myself in front of the fire, breathing in cedar and silence, not another human for miles. But when I turned off the main road, right before my driveway, I spotted a parade of cars parked along the tree line. SUVs, luxury sedans, even a coupe that had no business being up here. I killed my lights parked down the hill and snuck up through the woods, feeling like some burglar about to break into his own house. From behind the shrubs, I could see straight into my living room, brochures in people's hands, a group of teens lounging on my porch, railing a man admiring my exposed beams, someone grilling burgers on my back deck, and a huge banner staked in the yard, "Private showing today only, must qualify." I felt my blood go cold. It wasn't a prank, it wasn't a joke. Karen was hosting an open house. I watched her parade through my space, pointing out the antique clock I'd hauled back from Morocco, calling my shed a quaint hobby space for your husband's tools, every word making my jaw clench harder. I finally caught her eye through the glass, and the mask fell off. She slid the door open an inch and hissed, "You weren't supposed to be here." All I could muster was, "What the hell are you doing in my house?" She stammered something about a misunderstanding, claimed. She thought the place was abandoned. When I told her to get out, she started shrieking, "He's an intruder. Call the police," and then dialed 911 right there in my kitchen. The sheriff's deputies showed up 20 minutes later, lights flashing, and there I was standing on my own porch with my ID in hand, trying to prove I actually lived here. Karen ran up first, spinning some wild story about how I'd sold the place to her cousin and was refusing to leave. The officers were polite, but you could tell they were skeptical. I pointed them to the secure panel behind my bookshelf where I kept all my documents, passport, deed, everything. Took them about 5 minutes to confirm I was the legal owner. You'd think that would have ended it, but no. Karen doubled down, claiming I'd forged the paperwork, that I was running some scam to steal back a house she'd already started selling to serious buyers. They asked her for proof. She produced a wrinkled flyer and a note that looked like it was scribbled on the back of a grocery list. No legal documents, no contract, not even an email. But she wouldn't let up, swearing she had verbal confirmation. I would have laughed if I hadn't been so angry. As the officers took statements, the whole thing unraveled. One woman admitted she'd paid a $500 non-refundable fee for a walkthrough. A Bluetooth-wearing guy said he'd wired a deposit for early bidding rights. Every time someone confessed they'd handed Karen money, her face turned a little grayer, but she still wouldn't back down. She tried to gaslight a dozen people into believing she was the hero and I was the scammer. Finally, the cops cleared everyone out and told Karen to leave pending investigation. I stood there in the mess, wine cups, footprints, someone's half-eaten sandwich on my bookshelf, trying to piece together how my peaceful weekend turned into a crime scene. The next morning, after barely 2 hours of sleep, I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. Karen had orchestrated a scheme, and I wasn't about to let it go. I drove into town to the HOA office, a fake colonial monstrosity with plastic tulips out front, determined to figure out how Karen had gotten this far. Inside, the place smelled like lemons and cheap ambition. I asked to see Barry, the office manager, a nervous guy with a receding hairline and a talent for avoiding eye contact. He looked terrified the moment I walked in, mumbled something about being surprised to see me back so soon. I pressed him, why was Karen showing my house? He fumbled, said there'd been a form saying I'd vacated and moved out of state. I demanded to see it. He brought out a folder with a so-called property vacancy notification allegedly signed by me, only the signature wasn't mine. The forwarding address was made up, and the email was a burner Gmail I'd never seen before. Karen had forged my name, submitted it to the HOA, and told Barry I was off the grid and preferred not to be contacted. Barry just shrugged, saying Karen told him it was time sensitive, that I didn't want to be disturbed. He showed me emails between her and the board, all marked urgent, dripping with fake legalese. As I left shaken but more determined, a woman named Patricia stopped me in the parking lot. She'd attended the open house with her sister, and she was livid. Karen had posted in a private Facebook group offering a bank-distressed off-grid property. She'd even accepted a $500 deposit via PayPal. Patricia showed me screenshots of Karen's post, complete with photos from inside my cabin, pictures that must have been taken while I was away. That's when I realized Karen had broken in before, staged the place, taken her photos, and planned this whole scam in advance. If she had a key, someone in the HOA gave it to her. The betrayal stung worse than the crime itself. I spent the rest of the day documenting everything, every photo, email, recording, all in a folder I called KarenGate. I installed new cameras, filed an insurance claim, and most importantly, I called Rachel, my friend from college, who happened to be a real estate attorney and a municipal legal consultant. She laughed so hard at the trespassing in my own house bit that she nearly dropped her phone, but then she got serious. She said what I already knew: this wasn't just HOA drama, it was criminal. Real estate fraud, impersonation, and maybe theft by deception. Rachel had an idea. She'd pose as a buyer, reach out to Karen through the Facebook group with a fake profile, and see if Karen would take the bait. If she did, we'd have clear proof of intent. Sure enough, within 2 hours of Rachel's message, Karen responded, asked for a $300 interest fee, and offered a private showing that weekend. She even attached a PDF listing with my address and photos of my cabin, calling it a secluded gem, immediate closing available. That was all the evidence we needed. The next few days were tense. Rachel coordinated with local law enforcement, arranging a sting. 2 off-duty officers would pose as buyers, and Deputy Waller, the same guy who'd been at the first incident, would monitor the operation. Saturday blue sky, and all Rachel showed up with a camera, brooch, and a backstory, and Karen welcomed her at the gate with fresh-baked cookies like she was running a bed and breakfast. The undercover officers came in right after, and Karen started her pitch, lying about everything from the deck's finish to the seller's relocation overseas. When they got to the shed, Karen used a key she shouldn't have had. Deputy Waller and his partner stepped out. Karen tried to bluff her way out, but the cops calmly read her the charges: trespassing, fraud, attempted theft by deception, and unlawful use of property. She tried to say it was all a misunderstanding, but no one bought it. As they led her away, she looked back at me on the porch, eyes wild, jaw set, shouting something about it all being my fault. But it was over. The fallout hit hard. Word spread like wildfire. Karen, queen of the HOA, busted for fraud. Suddenly the board was scrambling. 2 members resigned. Barry took a leave, the Facebook group got deleted, and neighbors who'd lived in fear started to speak up. Turns out she'd been running scams, fining people for invented infractions, and pocketing HOA funds for years. We banded together for a class action suit. Rachel handled the filings. With all our evidence, Karen never stood a chance. One wild twist, I got a call from Doug, the so-called cousin Karen claimed to represent. He hadn't talked to her in months, had no idea his name was being used, and sent a sworn affidavit to help our case. Every piece of her story fell apart. In court, Karen still tried to play the victim, but the judge wasn't having it. The sting video, the fake forms, the scam deposits, it was all laid bare. Barry, bless his soul, turned on Karen too, admitting she bullied him into signing off on her scams. The judge handed down a verdict: probation, community service, restitution, and a 10-year ban from any HOA leadership. She tried to countersue for defamation. The court tossed it out with a laugh. Her kingdom was gone. That night I sat around my fire with a few friends, Rachel included, and we toasted to cabins that can't be stolen and Karens who can't win. Life settled back in slow and peaceful. I rebuilt the deck, upgraded security, and found my home more mine than ever. Sometimes strangers stopped to ask about the famous cabin. I just smiled and pointed to my new sign, not for sale, not abandoned, not yours. Even Karen's own sister showed up once, apologizing for the damage her family had caused, handing me a letter, thanking me for standing up. In the end, the real lesson stuck with me sometimes. All it takes is coming home a day early, a bit of grit, and a good friend to remind everyone in town that justice isn't just a word, it's a choice. Now, every time I hear a wind chime or see a neighbor wave, I remember this place stands because I fought for it and I'd do it again. So tell me, if you'd been in my shoes, would you have gone this far or further? Where's the line between neighborly trust and standing your ground? Let me know in the comments, because stories like this, they're not just mine. They're happening everywhere. And I'm betting you've got one too.